Welcome to the Authentic Confidence Podcast with Ben Fauske. Our mission is to help you find, coach, and communicate confidence in every area of your career. Join us for real conversations about how to build a confident life with world-class leaders, educators, and influencers.
All right, welcome everyone to this episode of Authentic Confidence. I am your host, Ben Fauske, and I have been waiting for this podcast. This has been the one. We have an amazingly special guest that has had a huge impact in my life, and his name is Dr. Craig Malkin. And Craig is the author of the internationally acclaimed Rethinking Narcissism, co-author of the New York Times bestselling The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. He is a clinical psychologist and lecturer for Harvard Medical School with over 30 years of experience helping individuals, couples, and families. His articles, advice, and insights on relationships have appeared in newspapers and magazines such as Time, the New York Times, Sunday Times, Psychology Today, Women's Health, Huffington Post, and Happen Magazine, as well as countless other popular print and online media outlets. He's also been featured multiple times on NPR, CBS Radio, the Oprah Winfrey Network channel, appeared on various local morning shows, and has been a guest on many radio stations and podcasts here and abroad. Dr. Malkin is president and director of the Cambridge, Massachusetts-based YM Psychotherapy and Consultation, Inc., which provides psychotherapy and evidence-based couples workshops. He lives in Boston with his wife and twin girls, and his twin girls are now actually on to other things. And I just want to tell a little story. So some of you know I wrote a book called Authentic Confidence, came out in May of 2020. And my work was inspired by Dr. Malkin's work called Rethinking Narcissism. And so I was following him and inspired by him. And then I scheduled an appointment, a session to talk with him. And the first session that we got in there, I was nervous. So here I am, the confidence guy, about to meet one of my heroes from afar, super nervous, not sure what's going to happen. And I was sharing the work that I do. And he stopped me in the middle of kind of talking through I was moving quickly and talking fast, as we often do when we're a little nervous. And he stopped and he said, Ben, the work that you're doing is really meaningful. And the way you're describing it, the people that you work with must love working with you. And I start crying. And he's sitting there, and we're Zoom, right? So he's kind of leaning in. He's like, buddy, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm just emotional. He's like, what's going on? And I'm like, I thought you would see me as a fraud, as a fake, as, I was being found out. I thought maybe you would say, hey, you're kind of stealing my work and you're kind of ripping me off. And, we have all these sort of irrational thoughts when we meet someone who really matters to me. And that single impact, that moment, is one of the permanent moments in my confidence ladder of when someone that I admired as much as I admire Craig said that comment to me. It was like, if he believes in what I'm doing and sees it, then I must be on the right journey, on the right path, because he's one of the world's leading experts in this sort of work. So I am so excited, Craig, to have you here with us. And you've been an inspiration for me. And so for those that don't know you, we'd love to hear, and this is kind of our program here, is, so what has been your journey with confidence? So thank you so much for being here. And what's been your journey? So talk us through that.
This is something I was saying to you before we even started today that I've been thinking about in a rough way, the answer to that question in a different way than I ever have. So I might jump around a bit.
Yeah, love it.
As polished as I normally am. But I also want to pick up on your sharing our experience. It's such a great example of the kind of things that get in the way of confidence. Because essentially, when you think about it, you were expecting me to be a jerk.
I was scared. I was scared
my
you
response
would be.
To you.
Yeah.
That's pretty awful. That would say something pretty awful about me.
Yeah.
But we do that, and it undermines our confidence that we somehow feel implicated in the bad response to us.
Yeah.
That it is a reflection on us.
Somehow my fault. I deserved that. Right.
Yeah. and anticipating it.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad I could provide a different experience.
It was amazing. It was amazing.
So, yeah. So my confidence journey, I'm going to summarize it this way, that what I had to overcome, and I might even get a little vulnerable about this because it is like it's something that I struggled with for a long time. I didn't have words for. My obstacle was that I always felt simultaneously ahead and behind. That was the story of my life.
Yeah.
So when I was in kindergarten, I remember tying a shoelace and feeling so great when I finally mastered it. And then there was a series of books. I think they were called Be a Better Reader books. And The Fox in the Box and The Pig in the Jig. And I loved all that. And it's like
Yeah.
tearing through that. And I was aware without feeling particularly puffed up about it that I was moving more quickly than the other kids were.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I was just enjoying myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometime during that year, I know now it's because I guess some well-meaning teachers and or my parents, maybe my mother, pushed for this, pulled me out of that class and dropped me in first grade.
Wow. So this is the middle of so you're starting to build relationships and like loving life, loving this experience. And what was the message? Like, what was told to you as to why
there
that
was nothing
done?
told to me.
So you didn't know if you did something wrong or something right. You just knew I'm different.
I lost all my friends. I'm different. And then, of course, when I got there, expectations are very different in first grade than they are in kindergarten. And it was hard. It was really hard. Suddenly things were hard for me.
Yeah.
And I felt dumb. And all the kids were bigger than me. That's a big jump.
Yeah.
And I remember walking outside in the halls. This is a place called Potomac Montessori School. That's where I started in Maryland. I remember walking outside in the halls and seeing the multicolored, like red and blue structures tunnels that you can climb in and out. And somehow I felt like it was inaccessible to me now. I didn't have those words either. It felt all outside of it. And that was my first grade experience.
And what do you think what did they observe about you that they went, oh, this kid is advanced, we got to move him up, or he won't be challenged or something, right? Whatever. What do you think they observed? What did they see, do you think?
Just nothing that I was reading quickly.
Yeah. So they just watched you firing through 20 books and they went, oh, this is not a kindergartner intellect. This is a first grader intellect.
Exactly. So they dropped me into that. And I vividly remember the first homework assignment. And I felt like I wasn't smart enough.
So it did the exact opposite of the intention.
Exact opposite.
And what were you interpreting during that time about yourself?
I'm not as smart as people think I am. Again, I didn't have the words for it.
Wow.
They expected me to be able to do this easily. And looking back, I probably was doing it fine, but I wasn't flying through things. And no one told me I shouldn't be flying through things. So it gets worse. It gets much worse. So that's the development of my confidence.
Yeah.
Again, how does the environment and how do people respond to you?
Yeah.
Are they attuned to your needs? Are they attuned to your feelings? Or do they gloss them over in favor of some other agenda?
Yeah.
Either it made my mother feel better to have a prodigy.
Sure.
Or it made the school feel good to have a prodigy.
Yeah.
No one gave a crap what the kid felt.
Well, and you weren't even asked. You didn't have a choice.
Was not even asked.
There was no agency there at all. It was just, this is what's happening to you.
So now it gets worse. We move from Maryland to Connecticut, where my father moved because he started working in New York City. He worked in Manhattan, and now we lived in a commuter city called Darien, Connecticut. And after I moved there, I went to a private school called Plumfield. And their stance was, well, he hasn't done our first grade.
Oh my gosh.
See where this is going.
Oh no.
So I repeat first grade.
Oh my. And again, nothing said to you. It's just like,
they're just concerned that you maybe didn't get some of the things that they teach, and so they want you to have that experience at their school. So now I'm held back. Wow. So now I'm exactly where I should be, but I've been held back.
But you've had two
now,
negative experiences. You got jumped up without explanation, and now you're repeating. And what sort of kids have to repeat a grade?
Yeah. It gets worse. So now I proceed through Plumfield, and I get to around. I'm fly through English. I mean, I will let everybody out here know I am not a math genius. I work hard at math, and I love math, and therefore I did well at math. But I didn't exceed expectations. I wasn't particularly brilliant compared to other kids in math. I just loved it.
Yeah.
So I stayed in with math, but with English, again, I was just flying through stuff. So by the time I get to 5th or 6th grade, I'm writing stories on my own. The teacher is wanting to encourage me write stories on my own. I'm hesitant to name drop here, but one of these teachers who was viewing me in this way was, what's her name? Like the author of Anne Martin, the author of the Babysitter series. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And
and she's going, you've got talent.
Yeah. Anyway, she moved on. I was taken on by another teacher. So this is like 5th, 6th grade. And they decide, okay, this is worthless, him teaching him grammar and whatever. He knows how to do this. So the next teacher puts me in a class by myself for 2 hours of the day, where it might have been 5th grade. I think it was 5th grade, reading Shakespeare, reading Macbeth.
By yourself?
By myself. And then I would answer questions on it.
So they just bring in a stack of books, and you're sitting in a desk by yourself.
Tiny print.
And you're told what about this experience?
We just think this will be more interesting for you. And really think it's an opportunity for you to continue to grow in your ability as a writer and a reader.
And how are you interpreting this?
It's mixed. On the one hand, I realize, wow, they really see me as some, again, prodigy, some special kid.
Yeah.
On the other, it's a repeat of the 1st grade experience where I'm reading Macbeth and Beowulf and Grendel.
And you're what age?
I'm like, what the hell does any of this say? I have no idea what this means.
And you're what age
print
at this point?
So I am, let's do them at like 11, 12? No, 10.
Oh my God. So the context and the backstories and what this is really about. Yes, you can comprehend it, but you're not in a space in life where you can, what is happening to me? I'm guessing is what you're thinking. What is happening to me?
What the environment and people were constantly neglecting in favor of some story of me. And we think about the confidence in this way. How are you perceived versus how are you feel, or what's going on inside? Talk about imposter syndrome. And what we were glossing over again and again was, okay, maybe I had some talent for reading and writing stories, and that made me advanced. But what do I need emotionally?
Yeah.
How can I understand things emotionally? So I'm reading these college level texts and answering short answer questions on them. And they're emotional questions.
Yeah.
That a 10-year-old can't really grapple with easily. Like, what motivated Macbeth to do such and such? And I'm like, I don't know. Ask him.
Well, and what were your friends or classmates thinking about all of this?
This was another blow to my confidence. So I had a nickname. I had really long, tight curly hair for much of my life up until my early adulthood, and then it was very unruly. So they called me Fro Brain. All right. So on the one hand, acknowledging
Wow.
there's something different about this kid's mind, and then the other was Fro Brain. I had a couple of close friends. Those were rocky relationships. They weren't uniformly positive. And so from here, it gets worse. So now I'm already an anxious kid and self-doubting, and I don't know. I'm supposed to be smart. I don't feel smart in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Now I have to graduate Plumfield because they've tapped out what they can do for me. So I moved to another private school called King's School in Stamford, Connecticut. And I take an entrance exam, and I'd never seen anything like this. I've never taken an exam like this in my life. And I totally flubbed it, I'm sure. Anyway, so after advancing me, I was in the same math class as my brother, who's 2 years ahead of me. And as you can see, they took me out of class, put her by myself. So I get to King's School, and they say, well, he hasn't done our 8th grade.
Oh my! So you basically graduated from the previous school.
I was advanced twice and held back twice.
That seems like that's. I mean, what were your parents thinking about all of this? Were they advocating for you? Were they confused about it? They're just like, oh, I guess that's what the school wants us to do.
So again, what's missed emotionally that undermines confidence? It's not so much that it was hard or challenging, or even that I was isolated relationally or emotionally because of the changes. It was that nobody was there to talk to me about it. Right. So I had no way of making sense other than this is hard for me. And to try to talk about the feelings about it, my mother would say, oh, Craigie, you can do this. You can do anything.
Yeah. And that was it.
That's what she needed to believe.
Yeah.
And of course, I don't feel like I can do anything. So now there's that mismatch. So I'm not who people think I am.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be hard.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my starting point as I got more and more advanced in psychology and studied it and got into graduate school and developed my interests. I even in graduate school, I was like, I don't know anything. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, because it was conflicting messages. It was you're really gifted, but you're not that gifted, or you're not our kind of gifted, or we're not sure if you're gifted,
or there's we missed something. It turns out it's not true. I think that was my take on what it meant.
Yeah. Eventually, someone's going to say,
it's not really true.
Craig, actually, you're just an average kid.
Yeah. And so now this is what I had to overcome.
Yeah.
I had to learn that it's okay to say things are hard, and it's okay to talk about the experience of it. Doesn't mean that you're not smart.
Yeah.
It doesn't. I had to develop my own compass, because what that trained me to do was listen to what other people think.
Yeah.
Right. With their blessing, I'm a prodigy, and with their alternative feedback, I'm an idiot.
Yeah. And you alternated between those two beliefs of yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So then you get to college. So then what was that experience like?
Oh, it was completely overwhelming. So by then I had borrowed a page from my mother's book, which, spoiler alert, she was extremely narcissistic. And she would hold court, and she would put on shows and starring herself. And so I get to college, and I discover I have a good sense of humor, and I can tell stories. And so it's the Craig Show.
And you hold court, and like people gathered around.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure.
You're a great storyteller. Yeah. And it's like, what was the quality of your relationships at that point?
Terrible.
Because that's been my experience too, right? When it's sort of like we have got all these acquaintances, but nobody knows really the truth of what we're really processing, right? It's lonely.
So they don't really connect with you as who you are.
Yeah.
It's some story about you. Yeah. It's some, and you know it. And so I knew it. I come back to I knew it inside. I had some of the worst, most relationships, some of the extremely narcissistic friends and partners, I fell into that.
Yeah.
Because of that vulnerability. And also I was very drawn to people who had a strong need to tell me who I was.
Yeah.
Because I've been trained to.
Yeah. You had been. Yeah. And do you think part of your draw to the work of psychology was to sort all this out?
100% my draw to psychology was to sort all this out.
Yeah.
There's a line in graduate school about research that people do as part of their dissertation and their special projects. Research is me search. So my first research project was supposed to be on narcissism. I had this idea of testing people with narcissism and then having unobtrusively or sort of just out of reach a mirror, and then using video camera to like catch how many times did they glance in the mirror.
Oh my gosh.
And also with and another condition where there was a mirror present, and then do they have more self-involved stories with the mirror present? It was too hard to do.
Yeah.
So my research project was on self-esteem. Still, research is me search.
Yeah. Yeah. The two polar ends, right? And I think in the book, what I love is when you talk about egoism versus the unhealthy narcissism, right? And those two, and you were living those essentially extremes, right?
Absolutely.
Part of you was trying to serve and fit in and be this smart person that everyone saw. And then there's a part of you that's like, no, I am reading quickly. I am understanding advanced. I am, the Craig show. People are buying tickets.
Yes.
And I'm selling them. And it feels good to get a crowd of people sort of stroking my ego and telling me how amazing I am.
I started getting invited, we back up a little bit, to high school parties because I overcame my anxiety by discovering that I could say things that people thought were funny.
Yeah.
And so I got invited to parties because
Yeah.
people thought I was hilarious.
Yeah.
So
and so then so now you're starting to getting through college, you're starting to, I'm guessing, sort of discover yourself a little more. How did you determine what sort of work to do post college? Like what?
Again, research is me search. So
yeah.
I don't need to get too much into the detail of this, but I was going to be a writer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I decided at a certain point that my very favorite novelists were pretty amazing psychologists. So I decided that if I wanted to be a fiction writer, that I should be able to write a character from the ground up.
Yeah.
So that's how I decided to go into psychology. Yeah.
So really it was a mechanism to become a better writer. It's really how the original intent. Yeah. Fascinating.
And then I wound up doing an externship, I forget what they're called, at a runaway shelter for college. And I fell in love with the work. Oh. In addition to the fact that I just sort of was voting with my feet, I was I had my advisor for English. Because you had to have an advisor, you declare a major, so I'm my advisor. And I went in one day and she said, if you just took this extra class, you could also declare a psychology major. And I was like, really?
No way.
I was
so that's how close you were to not graduating with the psychology degree.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So I went ahead and took that class, and one of them was the Junction runaway shelter, the runaway shelter stint that I did. That was part of it. You had to have a clinical experience, and that's how.
So what was the epiphany in that experience for you?
There was this little girl at the shelter who I knew her backstory just because people had told me that her father was never around. Her mother worked. She had other siblings, and she was pretty lonely all the time. And when I got there pretty early on, she latched on to me. And really clung to my side. She always wanted to know where I was. And I wound up having this relationship with her over the course of, I think it was only 2-3 weeks that they could be there over the course of that time where I would just ask her questions about what was going on. And it was like the first time anybody had ever done that with her, like really been curious about her internal world. And I remember when we said goodbye, she gave me the biggest hug. And I felt like it made an impact that I was like, wow, you can really make an impact with just these simple moments of being a person for another person.
Yeah. Well, and what I love about that is that's not the Craig show.
Right.
So you found a space to sort of let the ego alone and just go, what if I'm just present with this person?
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like she was a little sister to you, right? Like just like, hey, what's going on? And that connection, I'm guessing, was one you're like, oh, I'm not used to this and I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. It suddenly opened up a different world for me.
And what if I spend the rest of my life making these sorts of connections rather than the extremes that I've been living in? Because this, I'm guessing, felt really grounded and safe.
It was amazing. I was special to someone.
Yeah.
Instead of being special for them.
Wow. That's an amazing statement. Isn't that how most of us live? We're special to someone, right? I mean, when we're performing, right? And this is my story too, right? I had 8 jobs in 8 years, spent a lot of time performing. There's a hollowness to that I think our confidence is so fragile.
Yes.
Because if the applause isn't there, let's say you tell the joke one time and the crowd erupts and you start telling it the second time and they go, we've heard this one before, Craig.
Precisely.
We're so fragile. We're so right. We're so exposed to, because it's not a real relationship.
Exactly. And this is what dovetails with the book thing. You're referring to my ideas. So I viewed narcissism as this basic drive to feel special, exceptional, unique, or stand out from other people on the planet. And clearly I was getting the message that I had some reason to feel that way, but I couldn't own it. It didn't really feel like me.
Yeah.
Right. But we all have that need. And I think of narcissism along the spectrum from not enough of that ability to feel special all the way to too much.
Yeah.
So echoism, which is drawn from the myth of Narcissus and Echo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Echo is the nymph who fell in love with Narcissus, the vain Greek youth.
And so couldn't compete with his image in the water, right?
And in fact, she had no voice of her own.
Yeah.
She was cursed to repeat the last few words that she heard. She could only repeat back what he said. Eventually, in the story, there's 2 versions. In one, she fades away until there's nothing left but her echo. There's no body. There's no person. This is a great way of understanding echoism. If you can't ever feel special to someone, like even that sense of special, you lose a sense of voice. You lose a sense of theirs that's so important in relationships. I definitely struggled with that. And I did my best to compensate by being special for people.
Yeah.
The more pathologically narcissistic choice of putting on the show, finding ways to stand out above the crowd. I wasn't very good at it. As I often said when I was growing up, it's like I'm a failed narcissist. I have all of the shame and none of the puffery.
All the downsides and none of the benefits.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, I tried, and I could certainly hold court, but at the slightest, the lack of the extreme protective narcissism, like where you can fight back, it just wasn't there.
Yeah.
So at the first hint that somebody wasn't interested, I would just collapse. I wouldn't fight back. I wouldn't insult anyone.
Like a true unhealthy narcissist would double down and puff and fight and attack, and you would go, I guess
they're right.
I guess they're right. It's interesting though. Like to me, what's fascinating though about the work is you'd been around it enough to relate to it and understand it though.
Yes.
So when you see it, when you see the, the characteristics of a narcissist, it's not like you're freaked out and afraid of it. It's like, oh, I recognize that.
I grew up with it.
I grew up with it. I'm not afraid of it. And I think most people are so petrified of that behavior. And in some ways we should be, because they're they're not safe to be around. But in other ways, you have the courage to just walk in and hold a conversation with a person who's in the middle of that. So those that
sometimes even date them, unfortunately.
No, that's a whole other episode I think we could have that I'm sure would be fascinating. But one of the things that I get asked a lot is, all right, Ben, I'm neighbors with, related to a narcissist, and it's, I can't quit the job. Like they're connected to me in a family connection or in something that what do I do? How do I survive with this person who's got these very addictive, sort of narcissistic, overconfident tendencies? What would be some of your suggestions for that person?
Oh my gosh. The most important is to recognize and hold on to your healthy anger and disappointment. Because often with people like that, in relationships like that, the way they react, the way they speak, just kind of drives you into yourself and down where you don't want to say anything and you don't want to express. And that is fine in some relationships, like with a boss. You can't speak truth to power all the time. And you certainly can't seek revenge verbally.
Right.
So there's a lot of things that you can't say. What you don't want to do is to make this trade internally where you give up that anger in favor of compliance or agreement with their story of you. So I spent a lot of time helping people. Like me as a kid, I needed to get angry. I had no opportunity. I had nobody helping with me, but I was furious at times, absolutely furious. And that anger, that adaptive, healthy anger, helps connect us to knowing what we need and what we deserve in the way of interactions, how we deserve to be treated as a human being. So to at least be able to, like when somebody treats us like a jerk, like you anticipated with the possibility of never having met me before. Right? When someone treats us like a jerk, even if it's not safe or we can't say, you're a jerk. Like, what the hell is wrong with you?
Right.
To at least know inside, this has nothing to do with me. Right. Because people say, that they hold their boundaries and protect themselves with these, but really they're taking it in.
They are. And they're becoming that echoist, essentially, right? They're going, I'm going to tell this person what they want to hear so I can just get, but a part of them dies inside every time they do that. Instead of saying, don't talk to me like that anymore.
Right. Or even if you can't, knowing that they shouldn't.
Right.
And, like there's or just people you can't even say
sort of
that
the defiance, the defiant look of, I'm not smiling, I'm not nodding, I'm not saying anything, but internally, I know I'm worth more than what you're describing me to be.
Right. In fact, sometimes the very best response to those people is to just feel your anger. And say nothing. Just hold silence.
It's fascinating.
And watch them scramble.
What I ask people all the time is in our coaching work around confidence, they'll say, what would the most confident leader in the world do right now? And it's crazy to me how many times people say, I think they would have a little smirk on their face and say nothing. Like, you're not getting to me. I don't need to defend myself. I don't need to address this. I'm simply I'm holding my space, and essentially the rest of the world is going to see that person reveal themselves. And sometimes you don't have to attack them and do that. However, don't shrink, don't get small, don't believe the lies of what they're telling you and acquiesce to that or say pander to it, right? And so final thought for us here, was thinking about because this is fascinating. In light of that, what do you wish you could have said to your, let's call it your 6th grade or 5th grade self? What could have been different for you?
So easy. I know this now. What I would have said first, I would have said, how are you doing? You look kind of down. And he would have told me, like, I don't know what I'm doing, and this is really hard, and I'm scared. And I would have said, that makes a lot of sense. This is pretty advanced stuff. I don't even know that I like Macbeth.
Yeah.
I don't blame you for not wanting to read it.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do this if you don't want to.
Yeah.
And I still think you're smart.
Yeah. And I love that. And I think so much of the work that we do is just permission to ask for what you want.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't have access to what we want, right? It's so overwhelming. But if we take a breath and go, how am I experiencing this? So like a phrase for me is sometimes I'll say, I'm not doing okay right now. Like, I'm not okay right now. Like,
such an important.
Yeah. I can't put my finger on why I'm not, but something's off.
Yeah.
And just sort of permission to remove myself from whatever environment I'm in, take a breath and go, what am I actually feeling? Is it anger? Is it frustration? Is it stress? And then what do I want from here?
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't know those answers, but we for sure won't get past it if we just keep blazing through the I'm not okay. And well, I should be. And I'm advanced and I'm reading Macbeth. So I should be grateful for these people for shepherding my brilliance and my genius, right? Everyone's telling me, Craig, you're so advanced. You should be grateful for this experience. You know how many people would love to be in your situation? Yeah, but who wants to sit?
But I feel miserable.
6th grade in a room by themselves reading stuff that's not intended for me.
Plus the kids call me Frobrain.
Yeah. And I'm called names and right. And so if again, having that experience over again, if you were simply able to find someone who you could have trusted with your emotions and helped you guide some things and maybe alter something, maybe not everything changes, but you probably feel a little bit more of a sense of, okay, I have some choice in this.
Yeah. Who wouldn't have just said, oh, Craigie, you worry too much. You're brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You worry too much.
Yeah. And who's that about, right? That's about her saying,
it's about her.
You're making me look really good. Keep it up.
Exactly.
And often when we have those narcissistic relationships, it's all about the other person keeping up their appearances. Like you're serving their appearance. And that's dangerous, right? And I think back to your point, Craig, that's loving you for how you perform instead of loving you for who you are and that connection. So thank you so much for sharing your story. Any final advice that you'd have for people listening to this?
I think I would just reinforce that the greatest power we have to like hold on to authentic confidence and not tip into egoism or narcissism is to allow ourselves to be vulnerable and connected in our vulnerability to people. Right? The way I often say it is, you can't be securely attached and extremely narcissistic in the same time. Like to the extent that you can truly depend on other people emotionally with all of your experience, not a piece of it.
Yeah.
You won't depend on feeling special. You won't have that addictive drive. On the other side of it, you won't have to give up any sense of pride or belief in yourself in order to connect to people. If you can just say things like, I'm not feeling great right now. Things don't feel okay.
Yeah. And on the flip side, I had an amazing day and I did something amazing.
Exactly.
And the person applauds
you. I knocked it out of the park.
Yeah. The people around you, I loved, I had a coach, a previous coach that would always say, Ben, be very aware of the people that don't celebrate with you when something great happens. Be very aware of that because there's something off there, right?
Advice.
People who care most about you are the ones celebrating the loudest.
Yes.
Like that's awesome that you did that.
Pride is relational.
Yeah, exactly.
Narcissism is a defense against relationship.
Yeah. And here's my closing thought is I am so thankful for that little girl who had that sort of impact on you. I'm wondering where she is now, what she's doing now, and I bet you made some permanent deposits in her life because those are the deposits that you make with me every month when we get together. And the fact that you had the awareness to say, I'm going to spend the rest of my life helping people have moments like this. The reason why I continue to do the work that I do in large part is because of the belief that you had in me. I was that little girl when I came to see you, a little lost in the work. And now to see where it's evolved to and the conversations that we have, I am grateful for you.
Well, Ben,
I'm grateful for you. And so thank you. And I have a feeling, friends, we may have Dr. Malkin back at some point. I have a feeling we've just scratched the surface of all the things we could get into at some point. But thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Authentic Confidence with Ben Fauske. And thanks so much again for our friendship and our work together. And if any of you are interested, Rethinking Narcissism is an absolutely transformative work. Even if you say, well, I don't really work with people that are narcissistic, it's really that full continuum of egoism. And there's a healthy and unhealthy version of narcissism. I mean, narcissism kind of gets a bad rap, but as you're talking about that, Craig, there's a healthy sense of, I want to do something amazing with my life. Exactly. I want to be significant. I want to be valuable. I'm ambitious about some of the things I want to accomplish. And there's a lot of health in that perspective.
We can draw on that. If we play with it, don't cling to it.
Yeah. It's powerful. Well, thank you. Appreciate you. And thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you again for the next episode.